it's really not that, not enough evidence to really sort of stick it up there yet. And then what happened was I was talking to a NASA engineer, and he told me, he says, "Oh, I was at the building, and the building is 999 Sepulveda Avenue in Los Angeles." And he said I was there, and he's showing me a video he took with his cell phone. He shows me these paintings that are outside of the elevator, and one of the paintings clearly looks like people sort of in pajamas in two different times, like they're flying through space. And the one is older than the other one. It's like there's a time travel type thing. And this is right outside the elevator where this supposed jump room was. And the next thing that he showed me was there was a picture on the other side of the wall, and it had all these circles all going into one circle in the middle. And then they had a picture of an eclipse on the one wall. On the outside of the building, it's the old Hughes Aircraft Building. There's these pictures of outer space, these big screens where they have these pictures of outer space. And it's very bizarre because it's an office building now. It's not an aerospace building anymore. It's an office building. So it was very strange that they'd have this. And then this aerospace engineer showed me something that wasn't there when I went there. Actually, when I was in Los Angeles, I took a trip to this building to see this. And I took photographs of the things, and I'm going to post them in a book that's coming out shortly called Alien Bedtime Storybook. It should be out next month. And it's going to have this story where I go to the building and I photograph these paintings, which are very, very bizarre, why they've stuck them. It's almost like there's somebody, whoever did them. There's no signings on the paintings, who painted them. It's almost like this is almost like this government wanting us to know that this is for real, or playing with us or whatever's going on. There was a 56 Chev, I think it was a 56 Chev that was on the roof. There's a structure, a car structure attached to this thing, a parkade. And on the top of the parkade, this engineer showed me the photographs he'd taken. And in the back seat of this thing, there was a note on the back seat of the car that was a note from a guy, and he was in France, and he was talking to his girlfriend. And this note, and I got a picture of the note. You can't really read it. You can see the note in the back seat, and it was basically saying, "I wish I could go back through time to visit with you." And this is on this note. I'm going, wow. So I go there and I check this whole thing out. The pictures are there, the same as he said. Why these pictures are there, why all these sort of outer space pictures are in this office building that has supposedly had this jump room going to Mars. And the one picture definitely is kind of weird. There's these two guys flying through space. You can see them. And that's all there is, these two guys flying through space at two different times, like one old guy, one young guy. And so it's kind of weird. But it really, again, it really doesn't tell. I don't spend much time on that because it really doesn't tell you much. It's sort of like it's, the story, maybe it's true, maybe it's not true. It's sort of arguing about what the government knows. It really doesn't matter. It's what do we know about what's actually behind this phenomena. So most of my time I spend on the music thing, the consciousness thing, and I do this download thing. I have this book coming out on where good ideas come from. Downloads in Nobel Prizes, scientific inventions, music, movies, art, and I go through all these downloads that people got in these different things, showing us that we're getting help in whatever field we're in, that we're being sort of guided to raise our consciousness, and that we're not alone. We have people, whether it's spirits, whether it's aliens, whoever it is, they're coming from this sort of non-local area of the universe and aiding our progress to move along.
Yes, they are. I do have several more questions here. Yep. I want to talk more about the music, a lot more, because this is really important. I have people in my groups that are very, very involved in this whole project. So a question here is the connection to the Anunnaki, the Nazca, Nazis, where the women, 13 kilometers. I don't know. They got a whole lot of things here.
Yeah, that's another thing that I know the Anunnaki story, and one of the interesting things for people they may not know, when we get into music, one of the main music guys that we've sort of been chasing around is, of course, now I'm going to forget his name, Eric Clapton. I was a musical idiot. I mean, I knew nothing about music until I suddenly got dragged into this alien music thing, and it was just like the consciousness thing. It was sort of like, I got dragged into it, and suddenly I'm obsessed with this thing. But Eric Clapton, there's a guy by the name of Michael Hill who I don't know if you've had him on your show. He's an interesting guy, he talks about the Anunnaki and his connection and the reincarnation thing, and he claims to be the biological son of Eric Clapton. And he's the guy that's photographing the UFOs over the Great Lakes. He's got all these weird experiences. He's been contacted by NSA, by people inside the government. He's being told he's being watched and all this kind of stuff. And he has this very real Anunnaki story that he tells. So if you go Michael Hill, Eric Clapton, I'm more interested in his experience with the Eric Clapton thing because Eric Clapton had a situation, and this again goes to the thing where it's maybe not aliens, it's spirits. Is Carlos Santana is one of the musicians who got download. Carlos Santana believes that he gets his lyrics from an archangel by the name of Metatron, which is the same archangel that James Hurtak, the scientist, dealt with his messages with aliens and stuff like that. He claims to have been in contact with Metatron. Anyway, Carlos Santana claims he's getting his lyrics from Metatron. In 1997, he tells a story. He's doing this. He sits and he has candles going, and he's sort of meditating. He's got this yellow pad, and he waits for the lyrics to come, as do a lot of musicians. And he's sitting there waiting for the musicians, like automatic writing. And suddenly he gets this message, and the message says to him, "You have not put out an album for 15 years. We're going to put you back in front of the public on the radio waves, and we're going to provide you help. We're going to put the best musicians of the day with you, and we're going to put you back out, and you have this message." And that's the alien message, the oneness of the universe, that people are special, and the whole message about the raising of consciousness. And this is the message you're to bring to the people. And 2 years later, he produces the album called Supernatural. It wins 9 Grammy Awards, more than Michael Jackson ever won. It sold 30 million albums, second only to the Beatles' White Album. It was the most successful one. And Carlos Santana tells the story that as soon as he got this download, the phone started to ring, and there was Rob Thomas, who's definitely been abducted, phones. Eric Clapton phones him. He has all these different people he talks. They all phone and they say, "We don't know why we're supposed to phone you. We think we're supposed to work on you with this project." And all these musicians come together with Santana and put this album together. And Eric Clapton was one of the ones that phoned up and figured he had to be a part of this album, was part of this album. And Eric Clapton is also the guy that wrote the music for Communion. So he has all these different alien connections, and his son is big into Anunnaki. He's got an Anunnaki connection. He talks a lot about this. He talks about the rhythm of music and the connection. He's very interested in this connection with aliens and music and stuff like that. So that's where I would go. If people are interested in Anunnaki, you've got to know the Michael Hill story, Michael Lee Hill.
Well, that's very interesting. You know that there's a dichotomy happening though within both of the musical industries. That the positive, the people are getting these downloads and they're getting great songs and great music, and then you have the other side that are also doing that. It's kind of like a war. Have you noticed that as well?
It gets brought up. It gets brought up a lot when I'm lecturing, and the one that's always brought up is Katy Perry. Every time. I actually leave her out of my lecture now. And I always tell the people, I say, well, you got to know the story behind Katy Perry. Katy Perry does, which is a lot of stuff that seems to be satanic and whatever. The part of the story people don't know is her father and her mother are both real right-wing Pentecostal preachers. And they run around on a tour, and they preach around the world. And what happened was Katy Perry, in one of her videos, kissed a girl. And that was at that point that her father started to preach against her own daughter. And he said, she kissed this girl. How am I to get the word of God out to people if my daughter's doing this? I have the daughter, the Satan's daughter, or the child, the Satan child. And I think what happened with Katy Perry is that there's an out between her and her father, and she figured my father wants Satan, and the producer got together and they said he wants Satan, let's give him Satan. And so the whole idea about whether Satan's behind, because a lot of people tell me no, it's not aliens, it's Satan, and I say okay. We take a look at it, and people will tell me, oh, when heavy metal came out, that's when Satan got involved in music. And I say, no, that's not what happened. Because I remember back in the 60s, I remember it was the rock and roll was satanic. that if you were in rock and roll, this was satanic. And it's always the thing that we like our music. We think our music is the greatest, and that our parents' music is totally crazy. I mean, it's like old time music, and that our kids' music is satanic. So it's always this thing. So rock and roll, and then if you go back to Elvis Presley, who's now sort of a hero, who would think that Elvis Presley was satanic? In the 1950s, Elvis Presley's music was considered satanic, and that was because he incorporated African rhythm into his music. And everybody knew that the Africans were satanic. They were of the devil. They were the fallen tribe. They were all this sort of stuff. And so if you incorporated, say, black music, then your music was satanic. And a lot of people don't know this. A lot of radio people, disc jockeys, lost their jobs in the 1950s because in a lot of states in the United States, Elvis Presley music was illegal. You couldn't play it, and you would lose your job if you played an Elvis Presley song. That's all changed. The blues was considered satanic because it was played by the blacks, and the blacks were satanic. And then if you even go back to jazz, it keeps going back. It depends who's making the assessment. Jazz was considered satanic. Go and look at it. It's absolutely true. It was considered satanic because jazz was played in bars, and bars, Jesus turned water to wine.
Yeah.
God is in charge of wine, but Satan is in charge of drunkenness. And in bars, you have loose women, you have drunkenness, and therefore anything that's played in a bar is satanic. And you just go back and back, and it just keeps going. So what I did, and this is how I got into the music thing, is when I got this sort of and it happened in Boulder, Colorado. One time, it was just ugly. There was people leaving the bill. There was people leaving the audience. I'd never seen anything like this before about this whole satanic thing. So what I did is, as I said, I'm a musical idiot. I have no. When I grew up, I couldn't care less about music. They put me in piano lessons for 6 months, pulled me out. I was a sports guy. I was a talk radio guy. I couldn't care less about music. Only got dragged into it because Chris Bledsoe told me the aliens told him the aliens were influencing music. It's the only reason I got into it. But back in get to this thing where I was sort of the musical idiot. My mother and my sisters and my father were all into music. My father built theater organs. My mother was a church organist for 40 years. My sisters were in a religious band that toured the country. So they were all into music. They were big time into music. And so what I said is, well, if there's Satan operating in music, then let's take a look at the old music. Let's look at church music. Let's look at Bach, Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, all these people who played the religious music, the music that is considered sacred, and let's see whether they're getting the same sort of downloads, the same sort of inspiration. They're doing this, especially automatic writing. And what I found is every single one. It's the same story. It was just different time. A lot of them were claiming that they were using automatic writing to write songs, the same as Led Zeppelin said Stairway to Heaven was automatic writing. And in the biblical community, if you're using automatic writing, that is satanic. But if you take a look, and so what I do is when I write this book, I have inspirations from modern music. Then I have the inspirations from the classical music, from the classics and stuff like that. And it's the same thing. They're using automatic writing. They're getting songs in dreams. They're getting inspirational downloads. They're sitting there channeling and pulling in songs like that. And it's the same thing. That this satanic thing really, I think, loses weight when you start looking over history and you see the same thing over and over again. And it depends upon who's assessing whether that music is good or whether that music is bad. It always comes down to our music. I grew up in the 60s. It's all great music. My kids' music, they're all satanic. They're all crazy. They've gone off the deep end. And, so that's the way I look at that sort of thing. I know the whole argument because I've sort of seen it in terms of music, but it's been there all through history.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's very interesting. Now I've just got a ton of questions over here. I don't think we can reach them all. And what I would say to you is that if it's not something you really know about,
Yep.
just go ahead
Yep.
and we'll pass it. So,
Yep. Yep.
okay, the May. Oh gosh, I lost it here. Okay, can they want to know about the Nazis and the UFOs? What's
I have great doubts. I'm not an expert, but I have great doubts. It's the same thing as the Americans having all sorts of technology where they have mind control and real heavy. They control the world and all sorts of stuff. I'm thinking, well, if the Germans had this technology, I think they would have done a little bit better than they did. I mean, it was almost like it's sort of we sort of put all sorts of abilities on people who really didn't have the ability. They may have been working on it, but I don't think they perfected it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have lost the war.
Okay. The next question is the would you address the involvement with the DOD Minister Paul
Paul
Heller?
Hellyer. There I can tell you an interesting story. Paul Hellyer, my father used to fly Paul Hellyer around. Paul Hellyer was the deputy minister, or he was the deputy prime minister, which would have basically made him the vice president here in Canada for Prime Minister Trudeau. He was a very, very powerful guy, no doubt about that. He was deputy prime minister. He was the secretary of defense under Trudeau. He was the minister of transportation. And my father worked in the Department of Transportation. My father used to fly him around. He hated him. He thinks he was an idiot. But I knew Paul Hellyer. I started to have contact with Paul Hellyer in the 1970s. What happened with Paul Hellyer is he was the Minister of Defense here in Canada, but he wasn't interested in UFOs. He did not get interested in UFOs. I don't care what anybody says. He did not get interested in UFOs until the Corso book came out. When the Corso book came out, someone had given it to him, and he goes to the lake and he said, "Well, I'll take this book and I'll read it at the lake, whatever." And he was reading the book, and his son came up to him and he said, "Dad, what are you reading that garbage for? That's absolute garbage. And what are you doing that for?" And he really didn't interest in UFOs, whatever. And then suddenly his son came back to him and said he was working for a general, a two-star general, and he said, "I just talked to this general. He said it's for real." So Paul Hellyer phones up the general and he says, "I've been reading this book on Corso. I need to know, is this for real?" And he said, "It's all for real and more." And that's when Paul Hellyer got involved in UFOs. But he did have a story that happened in the 1960s. Canada's centennial 100th anniversary of Canada was in 1967. In 1967, most of the towns in Canada had a project, a centennial project. So they'd build a building, they'd do whatever. St. Paul, Alberta was one of the places that had a centennial project. And what they decided to do was build a UFO landing base. So they have this UFO landing base, and it's like a tourist attraction, plays UFO music, and it has flags of all the world around it and stuff like this. And they built this thing. Now, in 1967, Paul Hellyer was the Minister of Defense at that time. So he goes to open this UFO landing base. Now, when I confront him later, he's very upset with me about what I'd written and stuff. And he said to me in Washington, I had a meeting with, he said, "I do not remember writing this speech. I don't remember any of the speeches. I didn't write the speech." And what happens in the speech is he says, "You got this UFO landing base as a centennial project. I just want to let you know, this is not the first time we've had a UFO landing base in Canada. In 1954, the Canadian government opened up Suffield, Alberta, for UFOs to land. Suffield, Alberta is the Area 51 of Canada. It has got a no-fly zone over it. It's an army base. They did nerve gas tests in there. It's a big, huge facility, and nobody knows what goes on inside Suffield." So he says we opened up uh, Suffield for UFOs to land. Nothing landed, and therefore, like there's no UFOs. So he makes this speech in 1967, and it goes around. It gets a little bit of publicity. In the 1970s, I get involved. 75, I have my sighting. 76, I get told about Wilbur Smith running the Canadian government program, and I see this article. So Wilbur Smith has died. His wife is still alive. She's the secretary of the Speaker of the Senate. She's just retiring. She's very upset. She wants to retire. She's upset about certain things that are going on in the government. I go to interview her. I show her the article. I say, "Can you read this article about this landing base thing? And can you tell me, was Wilbur involved in this?" She sits there. Her name is Merle. She reads the article and she says, "Yeah, that was Wilbur." And I said, "Well, what really happened?" And she said, "Well, the Canadian government, Wilbur went to the Canadian government and he said to them, 'If you stop trying to shoot these things down, I'll get one of them to land.' The alien that Wilbur Smith was in contact with, his name was Alpha. And there's a lot of stuff I've written about this Alpha alien. He said, 'I will get this ship to land if you will stop trying to shoot it down.'" So the government, there's three agencies of the government. There's the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which is the federal police force. There's the prime minister and his cabinet are involved, and the Defense Department is involved. All three agree, okay, we will open up Suffield for this alien to land, and we will not shoot it down. So then Wilbur goes back to AFA. AFA wants a guarantee that whenever the contact is made, whenever they have a talk, whatever. And this is the same year that Eisenhower had the encounter at Edwards Air Force Base, the rumored encounter. It was also the same year in Great Britain when this guy who ran the nuclear weapons, and his name is going to escape me, he worked for Prince Charles. He tells the story about getting an encounter. A general contacts him. This is 1954, same year, and says, "We got this guy that wants to meet with you." He goes into the room. He's talking to this guy, and at an apartment that's set up in London. And he said within a few minutes, he realizes this guy's an alien. This guy understands everything that's in his head. He knows every nuclear weapon secret in Great Britain, and he's just petrified. He talks to this guy, and then he says, "I want to meet with Prince Philip." And he says, "Okay, I'll go talk to Prince Philip." The meeting is shut down. He goes to Prince Philip. He says, "I am convinced this guy's an alien. I had a contact with his alien." And Prince says, "Okay, let's set it up. Go back. We'll talk to this guy." And they go back. Tim Good tells the story. They go back. The apartment is vacated. There's nobody around. The woman's gone, and the alien's gone, and no contact. So in '54, the British have a contact with an alien at the highest levels of the government. In the United States, the rumor story was Eisenhower had the contact at the highest level, and this is a story where the Prime Minister of Canada, who was Louis Saint Laurent, is involved. And so the second agreement is once the alien has the contact, they will allow the alien to take off without any interference. So the Royal Canadian Mounted Police agrees to it, the Defense Department agrees to it, and Saint Laurent takes it to his cabinet and comes out of the cabinet and says, "We cannot give a 100% guarantee." And Wilbur says, "Okay, that's it. We're calling it off. Nothing's going to land." That's how the story came out. The story
Wow.
was true. They opened up the base. It was the alien side that called it off, that said, "We are not going to land because we can't get the proper agreements." So that was a story that Hellier was involved in. And what he says now is, "Yes, I made the speech. I did say this." And the guy that told me the speech, I can't remember his name, and that's where I got in trouble. I said, "Well, what's the chances you can't remember the guy's name?" And he was very upset. He says, "I'm Mr. Cameron. I may be many things, but one of them I'm not is a liar." And I went, "Oh, okay." He didn't remember the guy's name, and it was a guy out of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police who had the file. He had the UFO file. He was the expert in the Department of Defense, and Hellier told me this. But Hellier didn't pay any attention. This was 1967. He said he was busy putting all like the Air Force and the Army and the Navy were all combined here in Canada, these amalgamated forces. He said that was basically what he was working on. He was interested in UFOs. He couldn't care less. So it wasn't until he read the Corso book. But there is a story that Canadians did open up a base, and this has basically been confirmed by the Canadian government and by Paul Hellier for UFOs to land in 1954.
Wow, that's fascinating. I did not know about that. Another question. Music. Well, they're basically asking music, Preston Nichols, and the chair. What is the connection?
I'm not sure. I don't know
Not
what
sure
that's about.
either. I'm not sure either. The next question. This information brought out in 2013 regarding a huge black budget amount of money missing and unaccounted for in the Defense Department. Can you?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I can tell you a story related to that. That's the one that was Rumsfeld who said there's $2 trillion missing and all this sort of stuff, and that's true. I mean, most of the black budget money is. I mean, you've got NASA working on projects where none of the money is going to the project. It's all being funneled down into black budget programs and stuff like that, and that's the way they have to operate it because it's all sort of highly classified. Um, and I forgot what I was going to say with this. The
Mm,
there is this black budget that does operate, and the president is sworn to secrecy like everybody else. They have to sort of run this thing off the books. And when you look at the situation they're in, I always say to people when they say they want this disclosed, I say you got to recall or look at it when you want this black budget stuff released. Do you want to give this technology to ISIS? Do you want to give it to Al Qaeda? Because you may be Americans, you may be the good guys, you may be the guys who are going to try to save the world with this and the pollution problem and all this stuff. Is ISIL going to use alien technology to make the world a safer place? Are they going to use it to get rid of fossil fuels? Or are they going to use it to kill Americans? And if you're an American military official, you're going to say they're going to use it to kill Americans, and we are not going to release this. So that's the whole thing behind the secrecy of these military. The military mind works that we are the good guys, and everybody else in the world is evil. Everybody else is
oh,
bad, and we have to control this technology.
that's very true. They do. Okay, we have quite a few more questions. Mm, about Marshall. I lost that now. Let's jump on this one. Connection to. No, we already get that one. It People keep adding them, and I jump.
Oh, I've got. Let me add that last question. It suddenly came back in my mind. My
Okay.
consciousness isn't working very well.
Okay.
just came back into my mind this whole thing about the black budget. There was a story, as people would know, I was one of the people who testified at the citizens hearing.
Yeah.
And one of the stories that I wanted to tell at the citizens hearing was a story that was told by Jesse Marcel Jr. Jesse Marcel Jr. was told a story about being contacted by a guy named Dick D'Amato in the Washington. So I contact Jesse Marcel's sort of handler, a guy that deals with some of his affairs, and I said, I'd like to see if I can tell this story that Jesse Marcel told. I'd like to confirm that the story's true, and I'd like to tell the story. I don't really hear back from him, and then suddenly Jesse Marcel goes to the citizens hearing, and he tells the story. Here's the story, and I tell it in this book, UFOs, Area 51, and Government Informants, that came out last year. I tell this story about the Area 51, that the Area 51 was a leak. The government wanted this thing leaked out. They wanted the story, and it got out of control. And what happened was the government, the Senate Appropriations Committee, suddenly found out about this. This is early 1991, somewhere around this period of time. The Lazar story comes out. They got aliens. They got a live alien at Area 51. They're back engineering Aurora. They got all this back engineering flying saucers, 9 different flying saucers and stuff. And the Appropriations Committee, Senator Byrd, who ran the Appropriations Committee, says to the other guys on the committee, he said, "Are we doing flying saucers at Area 51? Because if we're paying for this, we don't know what the hell's going on." And the Appropriations Committee is the committee that appropriates the money for the U.S. budget. So they're going like, we're supposed to know about this. Why where are they getting the money if we're putting out the money? So what they do is they hire the guy by the name of Dick D'Amato. And Dick D'Amato is a guy who works in a National Security Agency, and he's a lawyer. And he works as a special advisor, a legal advisor to the Senate Appropriations Committee. So they tell Dick D'Amato, they say, you go to Area 51, we want to know the story. Are they back engineering flying saucers? So Dick D'Amato, and you hear all these stories. He went to Stanton Friedman, he went to Tim Good, he went to Jesse Marcel, he went to all these different people, and he talked to people. He actually goes to Las Vegas. He talks to John Lear. He talks to Gene Huff. He talks to George Knapp. And George Knapp tells him about a guy that he's stalked. And this is a guy that when George Knapp was looking at the story, most people don't know that George Knapp had 24 other witnesses besides Lazar that were telling basically the same story. And one of them was a guy that George Knapp had stalked. This is a guy, a high-level guy on the base that George said, if this story's true, this guy will know what's going on. So he stalked this guy. And the guy basically, after 6 months of George meeting with him and not allowed to take notes, not allowed to tape or anything like that, the guy basically says, yeah, it's for real. We got the back engineering saucers. We're back engineering it. George says, well, what the heck? I mean, weren't you afraid that the story was going to get out? He said, no, we were afraid it was going to get out. And George said, what? You mean you had an alien? You actually had a live alien? And the guy said, well, we had a live alien. We didn't know what to do with it. We didn't know how to communicate with it. And George is just shocked. I mean, this guy's basically confirming this is for real. So when Dick D'Amato goes to Area 51 on behalf of the Senate Appropriations Committee, he wants to know what's going on. And so George Knapp he says, this guy has told the story. So Dick D'Amato goes to this guy at Area 51. He says, you've been identified. We want to know what's going on here. And the guy says, I'm not talking. I've got nothing to say. Unless my boss talks, I'm not going to talk. So Dick D'Amato goes to this guy's boss. The boss says, I don't care. Who cares? I wasn't involved. The guy can talk. If he wants to talk, I don't care. Let him talk. So he goes back to the guy. The guy says, no, I'm not going to talk. And then he stops talking to George Knapp. So the thing sort of breaks down. But later, Dick D'Amato tells the story, and Dick D'Amato goes to Jesse Marcel. This is the story I want to tell at the citizens hearing. Jesse Marcel goes to the citizens hearing. He tells the story. He says, I'm in Washington. I get contacted by Dick D'Amato. Dick D'Amato says, I'm going to talk to you about Roswell. And Jesse Marcel says, well, I've said everything I'm going to say about Roswell. I can't add anything more. I've said what I saw, the thing, whatever I saw. There's nothing I can add. And Dick D'Amato says, no, I want to tell you something. And he says, okay, fine. So they go to the Senate building. They go to the sub-basement of the Senate building, which strangely is a place where they supposedly kept aliens in the 1940s, to a huge conference room. And Jesse Marcel tells the story that are you getting that?
Yeah,
noise?
There's a really odd noise coming in all of a sudden. I don't know what
they want the story told.
Or trying to stop it from being told.
It's an interesting story.
Yes.
Anyway, I'll tell it, and hopefully people can hear through it.
There we go. It stopped. Good.
So they're in this sub basement, and this is where I tell a story in this upcoming book. I tell the story about the alien bodies that they had in this sub basement of the Capitol. And So he's there. They're in a huge conference room. Jesse says there's the founding fathers on the wall. It's a secure room. It's one of these rooms where you can't put bugs in there and everything. It's got the locks on the door and all this kind of stuff. They go in there and they sit at a table, and Dick D'Amato's sitting there and Jesse Marcel, and he says, "I just want to tell you something." And the book that's on the table is Whitley Strieber's book called Majestic. Now, Majestic is about two things. It's about MJ-12, and it's about how they handled the Roswell crash. The book is sitting there, and he just looks at Jesse, and he touches the book, and he says, "I just want to let you know this is for real." And he's pointing at the book. "I just want to let you know this is for real." Now, you remember, this is the guy that went to Area 51, that went and did all the investigations. They got back engineering flying saucers at Area 51. What's the real deal here? So Jesse says, "So when are you gonna tell the people?" And Dick D'Amato says, "If it were up to me, I would have done it yesterday, but it's not up to me. I'm just here to find out how much money is being spent on this. How much money is, I just want to let you know there's a secret black part of government that controls this, that has unlimited power and unlimited money. That's my only purpose. I wanted to tell you that." So here's a guy, and this guy's still walking around. Dick D'Amato's still around. A very powerful guy at that time, working for the Senate Appropriations Committee, who went to Area 51, who confirmed the story. This is for real. There's a black budget government that's running this thing. They have ultimate power and ultimate amounts of money.
Yes, they do. Let me see here. Along that line, somebody wanted to know, what about the idea that Donald Marshall and the Clone Center, the celebrities are coded? So what he's asking about is the Clone Center. Do you know anything about the Clone Center?
No, nothing.
Okay. That's kind of more in that super soldier stuff. The Pentagon has secured a $630 billion budget for next year. What do you, let's see, even though it's failed to even account for the money. Oh, somebody's make a nice comment there. That's interesting. So, let's see. What's your connection to Stephen Greer, James Gillian, and Nessetti Ranch? Nessetti Ranch, I mean.
The SETI Ranch? Greer, I followed him a lot. My opinion of Greer is he's like Bill Moore. People remember Bill Moore in the 1980s. I had a lot of dealings with Bill Moore. Super ego, thinks everything he does is right, whatever. Did definitely have contacts in the Clinton administration. He did have high level. All the stories he tells are true. I've listened to every interview he's done. I watch very closely. And what I always used to do is I'd go to Stephen Greer's lectures, and I would say, we don't want to go to his lecture. You want to go to when he signs the books in the back, because that's when somebody will show an abduction book and he'll get upset and he'll start swearing and he'll start naming names and stuff like that. So I'd go sit and watch him sign books, and he would talk an awful lot. Absolutely, the story's true. The story with Wosley, the fact that he went in and talked to the CIA director for 3 hours about UFOs is true. The story that he had with, I think it was Wilson, Admiral Wilson, the story about them, Edgar Mitchell and him going into Wilson's office. This is the guy at the Joint Chiefs of Staff that does intelligence for Joint Chiefs of Staff. That story is true. That Edgar Mitchell's told the story, Miller's told the story, other people have told the story, that they provided him with a document, and he realized that one of the agencies on that document he was responsible for, and he phones up and he gets a hold of a lawyer, and the lawyer says, "You have no access, you have no need to know," and basically hangs up on him. And he's furious that he's this high-level Joint Chiefs of Staff. That story's true. A lot of people will deny a lot of Greer's stories. Greer may be egotistical, he may be arrogant. He thought I was working for Bush when I was asking him questions about the presidents and stuff like that. I mean, he can say a lot of things, but he basically was in the loop. He was dealing with these high-level people inside the government.
Yes, I actually was in his working group here in Las Vegas, the CSETI group, and he talked about his meetings. In fact, we had a secret meeting about that once. So
Yep.
I know when he was doing that. I truly know he's for real. And yes, people do get, people really tend to feel that they got the answers, and all of us have pieces of the answers. That's all
right.
there is. Okay, we had another question. The Pentagon. Okay, that's that one. Do you hear one? They're asking something about the old Zionist and the Hebrew word tamald.
No,
Are you familiar with
no,
that?
no.
Okay. Uh, okay. One last question I think we have. What is the limit to the disclosure problems uh, that are dealing with both poles? Can you give us some information about? Do you have anything about the Earth and on the alien things that are going on in the North Poles and the
No,
North and South Poles?
no.
Nope.
I've
Okay.
heard the stuff, but that's in my conspiracy days when I was working on who's behind it. Now I sort of go to the sort of the center of the problem or the center of the issue, which is the aliens. What are the aliens telling us? And I think it's very clear that they are putting out very specific messages. They're dropping a lot of breadcrumbs, which are once you start looking at it, are very clear to see what they're doing. And they are going to disclose. That is basically what's happening. They're going to disclose,
Absolutely.
and there's nothing the government can do to stop them. They're
Absolutely.
going to the people. They're coming up through the people, and the way I say is, it's like, for example, in the 1960s, the American Psychological Association believed that to be gay was a psychological disorder. The reason that attitude changed was not because the high level people in the American Psychological Association suddenly realized that they were wrong. It was because the gays got together and people like David Bowie came public to all the teenagers who followed him and said, I am gay, and suddenly moved the issue. The issues are moved from the people up. They are moved from children that protest on the Washington Mall. It's never the old people that protest. It's never the old people that change. It's the young generation. It's the kids between 10 and 25 years old who are saying that their parents are a bunch of idiots. They don't know what they're doing. We want something new. We want new ideas. And that's why I say the aliens are influencing musicians, because the
Mhm.
people who listen to the musicians are the kids who are between 10 say 10 and 24, 25 years old, who listen to them. And every single social and political movement has been orchestrated, has the generating force has been teenagers on the Washington Mall, teenagers protesting. These are the kids who move the thing. And when they suddenly see 500,000 people on the Washington Mall with AIDS or gays or African Americans or whatever it is, they suddenly realize votes are at stake, and then suddenly it's like, oh, okay, we're gonna make the change. The change comes from the bottom up, and that's what the aliens are doing. They're coming up from the bottom up, and I say there's nothing going to change, because it doesn't matter whether it's the women's right to vote, or whether it's African Americans, or whether it's gays or whatever. The issue has come up from the bottom, and when enough people knew, the issue moved ahead and nobody could stop it. And it didn't matter how many bad movies were done about women or African Americans or gays, or how many bad articles were written. It's not going to matter in the end. Once the consciousness, when people realize and they talk about this enough, everybody's going to make the right decision. People want to do the right thing. There's no real evil people. Everybody thinks they're trying to save the world. People will make the right decision and realize this is the way to go.
They will. Yes. Uh, Somebody wants to know that are my dreams about being on spaceships real experiences that are happening?
That's a good question. Yes, I would say that's what we're looking at now. That's what we're trying to analyze. The free group is trying to do this thing, and they're sort of breaking down the groups. People who have not been hypnotized, people who are getting dreams, and breaking them in these things. And what I say is, the dreams are more real than people think.
Absolutely.
That you take a look at the number of songs that were created in dreams. The song "Yesterday" came in a dream to Paul McCartney. There's a whole, like I said, Google came in a dream. The discovery of insulin came in a dream. This is where, like, some of the aliens will talk. Bashar, the famous channeler, talks about this.
Mhm.
He says, this is where we contact you. This is our world. The world of the dreams is where we live. That's when we get you. We think we live in this physical world. It's not physical. There's nothing physical about the physical world. You break it all down, it's quantum potentials. You need consciousness to break down the quantum potential to form the piece of matter. If you take all the human beings in the world, take all the space out between their subatomic particles, you're left with a pile of matter the size of a grain of rice. It's all space. It's all sort of illusion. It's what we see. Consciousness makes it. And when you start to realize this kind of stuff, you start to realize that the dream world is part of this spectrum that I say that the aliens live in. They understand the whole spectrum, so they can deal with you, and that's how they get messages through to you. The same as spirits will get messages through to you through your dreams, and you're being instructed. And everybody knows, if you know the technique, that you can put a on you. Wilbur Smith, who ran the Canadian government program, used to do this. I asked, how did he contact the aliens? And they did the same thing that a lot of people will do in terms of spirits. If you want the answer to a question, you write it on a piece of paper. You put it beside your bed. What do you want to know? You go to dream, and it may take a couple of nights. You will get the answer. That's how it works. A lot of people have learned this. We've gotten to the point, I think, where we understand this. And I'll give you this example. The guy who invented more things than anybody was Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison knew how to do this. He knew how to get into this dream world, the hypnagogic state. When you're awake, you go through the hypnagogic state, you go to sleep. So what Tesla would do is he would sit in a chair. He always said he never slept. So he'd sit in a chair in his lab. He'd have two steel balls. He tells his story. Two steel balls. He'd hold them in his hand, and he would sit there and he would meditate. And of course, he would go to sleep. So he'd go from the waking state through the hypnagogic state into the to falling asleep. And as soon as he fell asleep, his hand would relax, the steel balls would fall out of his hand, and he had a steel bowl that would sit on the floor. And the balls would hit the steel bowl and wake him up. And he would immediately write down what was in his mind. And he had 3,000 books of ideas that he'd gotten by doing this. And that's what he was doing. It was like the dream state. He was going into this hypnagogic state, and this is where he was getting the inventions. And Tesla would do the same thing, and Van Gogh did the same thing. They all used this technique of learning how to get into this altered state of consciousness. And we can even do it now. We know, for example, in savants, that savants are left brain damaged people, and they have this ability to do, like this girl that Diana Powell is brought out, this girl who did 162 numbers telepathically with no mistakes. The first time she made 7 mistakes. The second time, this 10-year-old girl was able to do 162 numbers. She's able to do languages. You can ask her, what is I love you in German? And this girl who's never done German can tell you what is in German. She can do mathematical calculations. This is all coming telepathically because her left brain is shut down. She's a savant. She's autistic, nonverbal, so the left brain is completely shut down. The right brain, the universal brain that can interact with this non-local world, is open, so she can do all this telepathic type stuff. We know this. We understand. So when you're meditating, when you want to get an inspiration, whether it's going to sleep and getting dreams or whether you're using meditation, what you want to do is not quiet the mind like people say. What you want to do is shut down the left brain analytical mind that controls the physical world. You got to say, go for coffee, go do something else, get the hell out of here. I need to learn something, and block the left brain. And we can even do it. The University of Sydney in Australia actually does it. They magnetically stimulate the left side of the brain, and people, they'll say, draw a cat. And then they'll start stimulating the brain. The person draws a cat and it's a piece of garbage. And then they keep stimulating, and suddenly the person can draw a cat. And they develop these savant type abilities because they can shut the left side of the brain. And that's what it's about, whether it's dreams, whether it's savants, whether it's meditation, whether it's what Tesla was doing, is you shut down the left side of the brain, you open up the right side of the brain, and you can interact with the aliens, with the spirits, with this non-local consciousness world that's outside our physical spectrum. Our physical spectrum is run by the left brain. It's the analytical brain that says we got to buy bananas tomorrow. You're the center of the universe. You're independent. It's us versus them. We got to kill those people. They're the bad guys. We're the good guys. And that's the left brain talking. And once you shut down the left brain, the war ends. And you get into the right brain, which is oneness of the universe. We're all connected. It's a holographic universe. Everything's connected. And once you shut down the left brain and you get to the right brain, everything starts to change, and we get into this oneness world that the aliens, the spirits, and everybody's trying to teach us.
Absolutely right. Absolutely. I agree 100%. Shut down the left brain. That's what meditation is wonderful for. It's great.
Yeah.
I love meditation. That's how I reach the states I need to be to get the communications I get.
Yeah,
I'd love to go on and on and on, but we're about out of time here. We have 5 minutes left. So I want to make sure that you get to tell folks about your book that you're coming up and any kind of speaking engagements you're going to be about. And if there's any last thing you want to share.
Well, my website is presidentialufo.com. My email for people who have questions is whitehouseuFO@gmail.com. The events, I have a coming up. I have the one that you're going to do, the UFO Con, for Gloria Fenton in California, in San Jose. I guess it's in the San Jose area. That's at the end of March. And I'm doing the Ions, which is I'm really privileged to be able to do where Mitchell started the Center for Consciousness there in outside of San Francisco. I'm going to talk there about consciousness and this what we're sort of talking about tonight, how UFOs and consciousness connect, because they're doing a lot of experiments, but I sort of interpret it as left brain experiments, where it's like we're trying to prove this to left brain people, and I say I'm not here to prove to left brain people. The great Randy, I'm never going to win his $1 million prize. I'm there to show the people the right brain, the universal world, how it all sort of fits together, the big world, rather than to trying to prove to anybody that this goes on. So I'm doing the Ions. I'm doing a couple of events in Canada. I have, I think, one more in England, and I have three books coming out. I have the book on Tales of Charlie Red Star, which has been actually optioned part of it for a movie that's coming out of Canada, talking about the Rama group, this group out of Peru that interacted with aliens and went for flying saucer rides on the aliens. It's part of that movie. I have a book called Alien Bedtime Storybook, which is just short stories. My book on Area 51 and government informants that came out last year is kind of a Richard Dolan type book. It's a sort of a hard to read book. It's a lot of detail and stuff. And a lot of people I realized really couldn't get into the book, even though it has a lot of material about how the government cover up. So this is just short or articles, some on different presidents and stuff, little stories that you can read before you go to bed. And then the book that I'm most interested in bringing out, which I hope will be out by the time Contact in the Desert comes, because I'm speaking there, is going to be the download book, the Inspirations and Downloads, where I go through alien downloads. I go through all the Nobel Prizes that came through dreams. I go through all this sort of stuff, and I show that inspirations and downloads are part of how the world works, that we really don't really invent anything, and I show how all this links together and how consciousness is the basic thing. And if you start to understand consciousness, you can really move along in terms of understanding how the universe works, invent things. A lot of people have figured it out. So that's the book I'm really interested in bringing out, and it should be, hopefully it'll be out by the end of May. It's going to be called Inspirations and Downloads, Where Good Ideas Come From.
Right. Wonderful. Yes. Very busy. And I was always, I don't even know where I got this or whatever, but that all the ideas in the world, that all the inventions, everything is out there in the ethers. They're out there. And some of us get them in our sleep time and do nothing with them. And others get them and do something with them. And that, to me, is the only difference between inventors and non-inventors. They go for it. They do it. They accept it.
Yeah, and what you see is that I have part of a chapter where I show all the common inventions, that not only are inventions come out of the ether, that people pick them, but you take a look at the vast majority of inventions were invented 3 or 4 times at the same time all around the world. That it wasn't one guy. One guy got the patent for it, but if you take a look at the idea for TV, the idea for TV came while the guy was plowing a potato field in Utah. He got the download, but exactly the same year, 1924, a guy in Japan got the download to how to do the TV, and he actually was the first guy to develop the first picture in 1926. But 2 guys got the download for the TV in 1924 at the same time, and that happens. Nobel for the idea of the telephone. Graham Bell filed for the telephone. 3 hours later, someone else filed the same type of patent for the same invention, and he was only 3 hours late. This happens all the time. Piles of stuff is invented by numerous people at the same time. It's there when the time is right. The idea comes out. The time is right now for consciousness, for UFOs, and it's just like any other invention. It's going to be like a download. It's going to be suddenly everybody's going to catch on, and it's going to be all over the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this has just been so exciting and very, very, very interesting. I've really been thrilled to have you. I'd love to have you back after you get your book out.
Beautiful. I appreciate your interest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just want to tell everyone a little bit more. Starseed Awakening. I have 3 groups on this Facebook that you can attend. Come to my Facebook Starseed Awakening Experiencer group. Join that, and then from there you can attend all of the events and all the different groups. And then I have the local groups, 2 groups here, one for Starseed for the Awakening, the consciousness, and Starseed Experiencer group. So you can see my website at starseedawakening.org, and all my groups are there. My organization is everything you need to know about my organization. And remember that the radio show is for donations. You can donate through the radio USB, the underground radio, or you can also donate through Starseed Awakening. So love having you here, and thank you for tuning in. Good night, everybody.